Okay, and we are live. Good morning on your side, right?
Hello, yeah, good morning. I guess, yeah, morning on my side. It's like 10:30 p.m. your time, so good evening to the entire audience listening in from Thailand.
Yes. So I'm sure that a lot of our audience are waiting for our AMAs, and it's a little bit late, and we're sorry for that. But at least we are here. In case you guys want to ask any question, we can wait until the end of the live. Okay. So let's get started, shall we? Because we're in a bit of tight time.
Yeah, of course. Let's go ahead and kick it off. So thanks everyone for joining in.
Okay. So Jay, can you first introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course, yeah. So great to meet you, everyone. My name is Jay. I'm a co-founder for Sei Labs. My background is that I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Afterwards, I went to UCLA to study computer science, and in 2017, I originally got into crypto. My roommate at the time was going through Binance Launchpad, so we worked on a couple of different projects together. And afterwards, I ended up joining Robinhood, right? Like the Robinhood that had all of the stuff happening a couple of years ago. So I spent almost 4 years over there. I saw the company 10x, and back in 2021, so a little over 2 years ago, there was the entire GameStop saga that took place. For listeners that aren't super familiar with the saga, basically what happened is that there was a national kind of movement where people were buying meme stocks and pumping the price up. There are hedge funds that were trying to short the stock, and the hedge funds were getting short squeezed, so they were losing a bunch of money. And there was this entire dynamic where like retail was winning and everyone was super happy. And then just out of the blue, out of nowhere, Robinhood turned off buys for GameStop, AMC, and I think around 10 other stocks. And this led to national outrage, right? Like there was a lot of money on the line for the people that were helping kind of pump up these stocks, and there was no real communication from Robinhood side around like why they turned off these buys just out of the blue. So that was exceptionally poorly handled by Robinhood. Like at the end of the day, it turns out that Robinhood was not doing anything malicious, but it was still very messy the way that they handled that. And as an insider, it wasn't really any better than like being an outsider because we did not have any additional information that anyone else did. So I was an engineering lead when all of this took place, and it was just incredibly demoralizing, right? Because I had a bunch of friends reaching out to me. They were holding GameStop positions. They were honestly pretty pissed off that like, yo, why'd you just turn off buys? I'm not able to make as much money as I was before. Like there was a direct financial impact on them. And then my team was also messaging me, asking me like, yo, what's going on? And I had nothing to be telling them, right? So that was just a really bad experience. And that made me much more of a decentralization maxi, because anything that happens on chain is inherently trustless and transparent. And that would have helped avoid all of the issues that we saw happening with Robinhood. So because of that, 2 years ago, my co-founder and I started working on building a decentralized exchange. And that has led to what is now Sei. So I can go into more of a deep dive as well, if helpful. But yeah, that's a high-level overview of my background.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Jay. It's really interesting, and we'll get back to that for sure. And first, let me introduce myself. I am Crypto Bobo, like a crypto YouTuber in Thailand. I'm certain that everyone that are watching and will be watching in the futures of our old recording already know me. And we mainly focus on exploring new projects that have like an innovation, and of course, for the community and audience. Okay. All right. Let's get back to you a little bit, Jay. So you mentioned about your background, and it's really interesting for me because, for me, I didn't open a short, a long position on the GameStop, but I have been watching the Reddit posts of those like Wall Street bet stuff, and it's really funny, but it's like one of the crazy stuff about centralized problem that occurred that time too. I agreed with you that it was a pivot time that actually state that centralized exchange have a problem, and I agree that although you are working with them, but you morally doesn't agree with them, and that's how it turned out. They just create a scenario where they just produce other like competitors of their own like company, and
Yeah.
today here you are. Okay, so
Yeah, that was honestly a pretty wild time because we actually had like a all-time high in the number of accounts that are being created. But I think just the way that Robinhood handled that led to a lot of other brokerages getting substantially more traction just on the narrative that like Robinhood is a bad company. And I mean, yeah, it honestly just sucks because like you put your reputation on the line when you join a place like Robinhood, right? And then that does like follow you around. Like I was just like hesitant to wear my Robinhood branded clothing anywhere. Like it was just a really messy time. And yeah, I mean, I think that just really emphasizes how centralized approaches just don't play out very well. And I mean, we've seen that time and time again, right? Like we've seen that with 3AC, FTX, Silicon Valley Bank as well now. Like whenever you have these centralized entities where things are very opaque, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. When things start to go wrong, they can go wrong very, very quickly. So I definitely do think that things that happen in a decentralized manner where everything is trustless and transparent just leads to a much better user experience in the long term.
I see. And so here we are. We're with the SEI Network project, right? So today, let's talk about SEI Network and we can have like free discussion, like what are like the advantage of using SEI Network and what are our thoughts about SEI Networks and other L1 competitors. Okay, let's start with the some simple question, like what is SEI Network?
Yeah. So internally, we have one core thesis, which is that exchanges are the most important application in crypto, period. It's that straightforward. And we think this is true both on-chain and off-chain, right? If you look off-chain, for example, you can take a look at Binance. Their core product is an exchange. And the reason people come day in and day out to Binance.com is to be able to trade on the exchange. All the other services that they offer, such as staking and lending, those are all built up around the exchange and they derive their demand from the exchange. Exact same thing on Ethereum. On Ethereum, you would have the core projects like OpenSea and Uniswap, and all the other projects in the ecosystem, they're essentially built up around the exchange. For example, if you're taking out a loan on Aave, the main reason that you would want to do that is to then be able to trade with it, right? So the main source of demand comes from the exchanges. And this is also true for NFTs and games. Right, like the core utility for an NFT right now is speculation. You go to an NFT marketplace and you flip it. And for games, you have these in-game assets that are then traded on Axie stacks or STEPN stacks. So overall, exchanges are the most important application in crypto, and they're also the only application that has true demand. Right? If you look at most other projects that are out there in crypto right now, they don't have any semblance of product market fit once you take away their token-based incentives. So then the question, I mean, it's clear that crypto has, or that exchanges have product market fit. The question then becomes, how do you help an exchange grow? How do you help it become bigger? And that's what we at Sei Labs spend all of our time focusing on. We focus on the DEX scaling problem. And the simple promise that we make to teams is you can focus on exchange mechanisms, you can focus on user acquisition, and we will focus on building the best infrastructure to support your users. And that has really resonated with a lot of teams so far. There's over 120 projects that are building on Sei ahead of mainnet. So yeah, we've been seeing a lot of projects that are very excited about just better infrastructure to solve the DEX scaling problem. So yeah, I mean, in terms of our mission is to build the best infrastructure for exchanges. And if we succeed at this, then 5 years from now, Sei will be the place where a majority of on-chain trading activity ends up happening. Right, so that's more of like a high level how we think about this from more of a business standpoint. In terms of the product itself, the question becomes like, we want to build the best infrastructure for exchanges. What does that infrastructure actually look like? So in terms of that, the way that we approached it is we went and we talked to a bunch of different exchanges and we essentially asked them, what would you like to see in the infrastructure that you build on? And after having a bunch of conversations, there are a few different trends that were becoming very apparent, right? The first thing that exchanges cared about was performance. And the second thing that exchanges cared about was user experience. So in terms of the product that we decided to build, we decided to focus very closely on those two core points. So from the performance standpoint, the two things that really matter are latency and throughput. So we decided to drill into those 2 points. So Sei is built with the Cosmos SDK and Tendermint core initially. And then afterwards, we started working with the Cosmos team to push Cosmos and Tendermint to their absolute limits to help us get the best possible performance that is like possible with the stack that we're working with. So we worked with Zaki, we worked with Marco, who are two of our advisors. Zaki is one of the OGs in the Cosmos ecosystem. Marco is the current product lead for the Cosmos SDK. And we made changes at both the consensus level and the application level. So from the consensus side, we modified Tendermint to push it to its absolute limits. So it's impossible to make Tendermint go any faster than it is going right now on Sei. So specifically, we changed the way that block propagation works. We changed the way that block processing works. And this has helped us get down to a 500 millisecond time to finality in our public testnet, our new public testnet that we launched 2 days ago. So this is a public testnet with settings that mimic mainnet. So when we launch on mainnet, we will be the fastest chain in existence. And this helps vastly improve both the market making experience and the user experience. From the market making experience side, at a high level, the longer the time to finality is, the longer the time is between when a position is opened and when it's actually finalized and when a market maker can hedge it. And this then results in market makers needing to take on more risk. So essentially, the longer time to finality, the more risk a market maker needs to take on, which then results in them needing to offer wider spreads for users, which then harms the user experience. So that's one of the core things that we've been focusing on, and we're going to be the fastest chain out there when we launch. The second thing from a performance standpoint that's important is throughput. So what we decided to do with Sei is we added in parallelization. So we're currently the only Cosmos-based chain that is making use of any form of parallelization. And this has helped us get substantially improved throughput as well. What we're observing is an upper bound of 20,000 orders per second in our public testnet right now. So our internal testnet was getting 22,000 orders per second. This public testnet right now, we ran load tests, it's getting 20,000 orders per second. So that's a magnitude higher than what you would see on most other high performance ecosystems. Most high performance ecosystems get around 1,000 to 3,000 orders that can be processed any second. In Sei's case, it's 20,000. So magnitude better over there helps exchanges scale. The second broad category that we were focusing on is user experience, right? The way that we approach that is by building a native order matching engine into the chain itself. So you can think of Sei as kind of a general purpose chain with this order matching engine that is built into it. That's like, I think, a very simple mental model that you can have. So if you want to deploy a normal smart contract, you can go ahead. If you want to deploy something that is an order book based exchange, then you can make use of the underlying order matching engine. And this helps vastly improve the user experience from a couple of different angles. The first thing that it helps with is preventing front running. So for the audience members that are unfamiliar, front running is a practice where a user submits an order, someone else sees that order, and then afterwards they inject a series of orders in front of yours to be able to make money off of you. So a simple example would be, let's say that I want to buy Ether. I think the price of Ether is like $1,700 or something last I checked. 1638 now. So let's say I want to buy an Ether for 1638 and I accept up to 1% slippage. So that's $16.38 of slippage. So you see that I'm willing to pay up to 1638 plus $16, whatever that comes out to be 1654, I believe. Yeah, 1654. So that's the upper bound that I'm willing to buy it at, right? So what you do, you buy Ether at 1638, and let's assume that the market is super thin, so you're able to buy all of the Ether at 1638, and then afterwards you place a limit order to sell it to me at 1654, and then I end up purchasing it for 1654. And this all happens atomically. So all of these happen at the same time because of the way that you can submit these transactions on chain. So that would be an example of front running. You're able to make that 1% slippage completely risk-free at the expense of the user, and that's horrendously bad. That is exceptionally bad, and that is illegal in the United States markets. Like there's regulation against that, but that is technically possible to do right now, just because of the nature of how blockchains work if you want to do that on chain. So that's one thing that we are vehemently against. So what we've done is we've made use of frequent batch auctions. So the way that frequent batch auctions work is that at the end of the block, every single order will get aggregated together by market. So all the Bitcoin orders will get aggregated together, all the Ether orders will get aggregated together, all the Atom orders will get aggregated together. And then afterwards, they will all get filled and cleared at the exact same price. So every single market order in that block will get cleared at the exact same price. So let's say it ends up being 1638 for Ether. So this results in a couple of things. The first thing that this results in is price fairness. So every single user within a block will get the exact same price, which leads to a much more fair trading experience than people getting different prices within the same block. The second thing that this helps with is around preventing front running, because now you can't actually atomically interject these orders in between because everyone's getting filled at the exact same price. So this is one of the things that we've been focusing on, helps prevent front running, which is really positive. The second thing that we support is order batching. So order batching is a concept where a market maker, if they're providing liquidity to, let's say, 50 separate markets, rather than needing to submit 50 separate transactions or write a specialized smart contract to help with this, what market makers on Sei can do, they can just submit one order or one transaction that is composed of these 50 separate orders. And the chain is then able to parse that transaction and correctly route those orders to the specific DEX that order is meant for. So this helps improve the market maker experience. It's much simpler. And more importantly, it helps them save enormous amounts of money on gas costs, because you're basically taking everything that happens in 50 transactions, you're combining it to one transaction, and you're only paying the gas costs for one transaction. So that's a lot of the stuff that we've explored. And yeah, I mean, overall, that everything is completely built out now that I just mentioned. So we launched the public testnet with all of these changes on Monday of this week. And then afterwards, we're going to be launching on mainnet closer to the end of Q2 of this year.
All right. So that's actually a lot to process, Jay. Let me get start from where you started, and maybe I have some mistake, but please correct me if I do. So I actually like the ideas of Sei Network, where your core products actually oriented in exchange, like mainly focused on exchange, because a lot of people didn't notice, but actually most of the core DeFi application or any application that's being built on decentralized blockchain are actually have the exchange function involved in them, like the OpenSea and everything. And you actually like pinpoint that those like core function and just make a product where we prioritize those function. And I feel like blockchain really needs something like that. But we will get more into that, because of course there are others first mover, but we'll get into that why we have to choose Sei, or why is Sei actually better than the other competitors. And it's actually fascinating to learn that Sei Network is having like involvement in developing like Cosmos Tendermint SDK, with you knowing and having like working with wait, I suddenly forgot Saki, right? And the others core developers of Cosmos. It's nice to know that Sei Network is actually contributing to the ecosystem also. Like we will highlight that for like the Thai people too, that Sei is actually like involving in developing ecosystem. And the MEV problem, I actually agree. And the take on Sei Network about MEV is you guys are going to prevent the MEV from happening, right? Because from what I heard, like a lot of MEV that you mentioned is bad actors, right? So in order to get rid of them, like we are getting rid of other good MEV also. Is that correct?
No. So with MEV specifically, the approach that we take from Sei's side is we want to stop the bad MEV that you're referencing, and we want to redistribute the neutral MEV. So bad MEV is front running. Neutral MEV would be liquidations, ARBs, and NFT bids. So the approach that we're taking for that is it's going to be fundamentally impossible for us to stop this neutral MEV. Like either you try to if you try to use something where it's like just complete kind of encryption of transactions in the mempool, or like some kind of fair ordering protocol, what ends up happening is people start spamming the network, and then there ends up being negative externalities for that, right? So the approach that we're taking is we're going to allow this MEV, this neutral MEV to exist, because it's fundamentally impossible to stop it. And we'll use that for value accrual for the chain, right? So we'll have something similar to Flashbots, where there's off-chain nodes where people can submit bids. And then afterwards, there will be simulation gets run on this off-chain node, and then the top bids will be selected. And then the only way that the transactions associated with the bids can get included in the block is if that's submitted along with the bids, and then those bids are then redistributed to validators and to delegators on the network. So that is, I think, one of the things that's most interesting about Sei from a value accrual perspective. Like most chains are just like, oh, it's going to be transaction fees, governance, and like staking the network. In Sei's case, because it's a very trading focused ecosystem, there ends up being a lot more opportunities for this neutral MEV around liquidations and ARPs, for example, than you would see in most general purpose ecosystems. So that's why we think that's going to be one of the reasons why in Sei's case, the chain can become self-sustaining after a certain period of time. Like after Sei starts getting enough traction, then the costs for validators to run their hardware and the costs for delegators, or like the incentives for delegators to secure the chain, those will both naturally come from this MEV redistribution approach.
I see. So it's actually not getting rid of every MEV because it's kind of impossible, but it's actually having a positive impact on the whole ecosystem also. Okay, I like that stuff. Is there any involvement on the parallel execution side with the MEV stuff or anything that's going to happen on the chain? I recognize that you mentioned that Sei is the first app chain built on Cosmos that is utilizing parallel execution, right?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts over there. The first is that Sei is not an app chain. We actually think that the app chain approach is a very difficult approach to get working. I can go into that a little bit more, but we think that there's essentially three buckets. There's general purpose chains like Ethereum and Solana. There's application specific chains like Osmosis and DYDX V4. Sei takes a route in the middle, so sector specific, where we just build generalized infrastructure. We're not building any application ourselves. We're building this infrastructure that is super specialized for exchanges, and we allow a community to get built on top as well. So I can do more of a deep dive into the differences around that as well, if that would be interesting to you. I think the second question that you were asking was around, sorry, I'm forgetting the core question that you had asked.
Okay, so what I asked is about the parallel execution.
Oh, yeah. So the parallel execution is, yeah, we're currently the only Cosmos-based chain to be making use of any form of parallelism. But the MEV kind of prevention is not coming from the parallelization logic. The MEV prevention around front-running prevention is coming more from the frequent batch auction logic.
Okay, I get that now because we are doing the batch auction launch like this block stuff. So anyone who try to front run will actually get the same price as the person who submitted the order. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So when you mention the specific segment chain, I like the word bit. Because there are other projects being built on Cosmos too that are doing the similar stuff. Can you explain like why Sei is the better choice, or
Yeah, of course.
what can Sei do better than them?
Of course, yeah. So I guess this goes back into that sector-specific chain first that I was talking about before. So between general purpose chains and app chains, every single approach has their own pros and cons. The benefit of an app chain is you have really, really specialized infrastructure. So with an app chain, you have one application and you build the entire stack around that application. So by definition, you're going to have infrastructure that is the best possible infrastructure for that specific application, right? So the benefit with app chains is the customizability element. The benefit with general purpose chains is the social coordination element. So on a chain like Solana, every single project that is building in that ecosystem, they're all on the same team and they all help that ecosystem succeed. And that is the reason why most top projects are projects where it's a general purpose project, because that's the easiest way to have growth happen. That's the easiest way to have more people actually care about that project. Whereas with an app chain, it's just like one application, just one team essentially. And they're in a way just screaming into an abyss, and it's really hard to have that get adoption and scale. So that's why we think that the right approach is to take the best of both of these and build a sector-specific chain. So what we're doing from Sei's side is we like the approach of having customized infrastructure. So we do have customized infrastructure with all the changes that I just talked about. And that customized infrastructure is not just for one app, but it can be used by any number of applications. And from Sei's side, we're only building this customized infrastructure. We're not building any of the applications on top. The other thing that we're taking advantage of is this social coordination element. So we're enabling an ecosystem to get formed on Sei. And at this point, we have over 120 projects that are committed to building. So overall, that approach, I think, is a lot better. And the question you asked is around the Cosmos ecosystem, like what really ends up differentiating an app chain that might start to go more of this general purpose route than the approach that Sei is taking. And we fundamentally just don't think that an app chain can become sector specific. And the reason for that is that an app chain has one application, let's say it's the DEX app chain. And a DEX app chain that wants other DEXs to build on it, like that's going to take away from credible neutrality, because that app chain and that infrastructure is going to be supporting that specific initial app rather than any new applications that are coming in. So for a new exchange that's coming in, it doesn't make sense to build on a DEX app chain because they're going to be competing against that same underlying layer one. So because of that, most DEX teams that are starting to just launch a new DEX, they actually are much more comfortable launching on Sei than they would be on any of the app chain alternatives right now, because they don't have to compete against the underlying layer one. We're just building the infrastructure. We're not building any of the applications on top.
Okay, so that actually make a lot of sense, because the question was about like the app chain on Cosmos, and of course it's being the YDX and injective protocol, and both of those protocol, they have their own DEX. And actually I had I have my own question, like why are they having their own DEX and they're having other DEX being built on their chain, and how is it going to not cause any like conflicts of interest? And yeah, it's like until this day I still don't understand, because they still continuing to have like some products being built on them, like excluding the YDX. Actually it's injective protocol. I've been following their like progress, and it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm certain that Sei is going for a more like make sense procedures, where the other builders are going to build on the DEX focused infrastructures, I mean exchange focused infrastructures, without having to compete with you guys. You guys are just going to provide them with like the fastest road and the smoothest like wheels, and that's great. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly right. Around the injective point specifically, so we have a lot of respect for the injective team. They're one of the first movers in the Cosmos ecosystem, and they're one of the few projects from the previous like 5-year period that has actually stuck around. So a lot of respect for that team. But yeah, I mean, overall, the credible neutrality approach, I think the credible neutrality is extremely important. And I think that does long-term lead to a lot of differentiation. Like even if in the short term, some projects are interested in building a chain that is competitive with the actual project, I think long term it's just really difficult to scale that to grow out an entire ecosystem of exchanges if you're building an exchange yourself.
yeah. Okay, so it makes sense, and yes, respect to them. They have been building for so long now. It's been like what, 4 years, 5 years. So it's normal for like them to have to face like other new competitors, and because we're in developing like technologies, they're always going to have like newer innovation. That's normal. And so I'm curious about the Sei token, like what will be like, because they're going to be the application being built on Sei. I'm wondering about this, say like the token utilities. How are they going to be used and involved in the ecosystem?
Of course. So Sei is a layer one network. So the Sei token will be similar to every other layer one network. We can look to Solana as an example. The Sol token lets you stake the network. It lets you engage in governance. It lets you pay for transaction fees. So that is exactly what the Sei token will be doing as well. Governance, staking, transaction fees. The other things that I think become particularly interesting for the Sei token, one of the first things would be MEV redistribution. We were talking about that before. So anyone who is staking their Sei token will be eligible for MEV redistribution once that is turned on. And there's actually a lot of value that could be just redistributed from MEV. Like I was looking at the Ethereum estimates, and around like 2.5% of all DeFi volume actually ends up being MEV profit. So this is through ARBs, this is through liquidations. And that can get redistributed to the chain, right? So if you look at an ecosystem that has, let's say Sei becomes successful and it's like $1 trillion or $2 trillion amount of volume happening in like 2 years from now, that ends up being a lot of money that is just redistributed from MEV, right? Like even off $1 trillion, if you have like 2.5% of MEV value, that's like multiple billions that is already value that is being redistributed to delegators of the network. So that's extremely powerful, I think. And that's one thing that I think is going to be more powerful for Sei than any general purpose ecosystem, just because there's so much trading activity happening on Sei. And besides that, we're starting to see a lot of DeFi applications that are launching on Sei as well. Most DeFi applications get their demand from exchanges. So a lot of good DeFi applications end up becoming more interested once there's good exchanges launching in an ecosystem. And yeah, I mean, the Sei token will be used for whatever DeFi applications are there as well. So being used as collateral, being used for any other like interesting use cases they have in mind. But overall, I do think the biggest value driver will be MEV redistribution. And I think that's been underexplored by a lot of other ecosystems.
Actually, it's actually interesting numbers that you have pointed out about like being a couple of $1 trillion in volume. Like because sometimes people just imagine the short term like volumes, but they actually look past the whole like 1 year volumes when it's being added on. That's actually a lot, and the amounts that could be distributed from the MEV alone, it's actually a lot. I never calculated or think of it that way until you bring it up, and
Yeah.
I like the way that you guys are going to utilize the MEVs instead of them extracting values. We are it's becoming distributing values. It's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah, redistribution I think is a lot better than extraction. And yeah, I mean, I feel like in crypto, there's this very strong focus on the short term. But if you just zoom out a little bit and think about things from a longer term, I think that really changes the way that you would approach things. Like from our perspective, we're not really even thinking about this from, you mentioned like a 1 year time horizon. We're not thinking about it from time horizons that are that short. We're really thinking about it from like 5, 10 year time horizons and how the ecosystem will change and how Sei will be a part of that ecosystem. Like 5, 10 years from now, a couple of the things that we first believe is that, first of all, there'll be more on-chain trading activity happening. Like I view it as an inevitability that after going through my experience at Robinhood, after seeing 3AC and FTX and Silicon Valley Bank, I think that it's an inevitability that more and more volume will start happening on-chain just because of the trustlessness that enables, right? Like people are becoming more and more fed up with decentralized entities, and the trustlessness that is there with the decentralized approach is extremely powerful. And I think a lot of people kind of don't take it as seriously right now. Like even in crypto, I think a lot of people just are in it for the money and they don't really care that strongly about the trustlessness. But I think from a 5, 10 year perspective, like a lot can change in a 10-year window. And I would not be surprised at all if like there's a pretty significant shift in places where trading does end up happening. The second thing is I think that there ends up being very strong network effects to exchanges. It does end up being more of a winner-take-all market. So we want to build the best infrastructure for any exchange to get deployed. And 10 years in the future, we anticipate that exchange, if we're successful, those exchanges for each vertical, like spot, perps, etc., will all be on Sei. So we're positioning ourselves for a future where there's more trading activity that happens, and that trading activity, majority of it happens on Sei. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of value that could be accrued from MEV redistribution in that context.
Okay. So if those scenarios were to have or will be happening, would you consider that as successful events enough for Sei, or it's still not enough yet?
If you're saying that if a majority of trading volume happens on Sei?
Yes, of course.
I mean, based off what we're currently focused on right now, I think that would be a very good outcome. I think there's always more to shoot for. So I mean, realistically, we're not going to stop even if we get to that 10-year kind of goal that I just described right now.
All right. Good to hear that. And let's get to some other question about the ongoing situation in the current like blockchain space. So in my opinion, in case Sei is dominating the Cosmos SDK field segment for the DeFi application, with the upcoming Optimism Bedrock, for example, the base chain, what are your thoughts on the base chain or any upcoming op stack?
Yeah, so I mean, with rollups in general, we think like we went through this entire brainstorming cycle initially, where we just investigated every place where you could build an exchange. And at that time, we came to the conclusion that in the near term and the medium term, exchanges cannot be built successfully on a rollup because they cannot scale. And the reason for that is just like the math around how transactions get written on chain. So fundamentally, the way that a rollup works is you have execution happening off chain, and then afterwards you take the transactions that actually happened, you compress them, and then you write them to whatever the base layer is. So on Ethereum L1, that's written directly to the L1. If you're using more of a modular stack, you'll be writing that to whatever the data availability layer is. But right now with Ethereum, the base layer can support each block has a target of 15 million gas, and every byte of data that is written costs 16 gas. So if you do the math for like simple transfers, that ends up being around 6,000 transactions per second that are actually supported on the base layer 1 for Ethereum. Now, this doesn't actually get solved with anything like proto-dank sharding either. With proto-dank sharding, that number, we did the math, comes out to be around 6.7 kTPS. So it's not much better. And this is assuming that the entire block is used exclusively for rollups. But in reality, that's not the case, right? In reality, there'll be like OpenSea, there'll be Uniswap, there'll be Blur, there'll be a lot of activity happening on the L1 that'll be competing for block space with the rollups. So realistically, it would actually be closer to like the high hundreds of transactions that a rollup could actually support. So I think that it is very interesting, the developments that are happening in the rollup space overall. It does seem like they're taking an approach that is becoming more and more similar to the app chain approach that the Cosmos ecosystem is taking. It's also interesting that there's all this ZK innovation happening, which I think long-term is going to be very beneficial. But I think in the near and medium term, that's not really going to be competitive with just a normal layer 1 chain that is going to be able to handle higher throughput. In the longer term, I mean, from Sei's standpoint, we just want to build the best infrastructure for exchanges. We're not tied to having that be a layer 1. So if it does become clear that having other scaling strategies is more beneficial, then that is an approach that we'd be open to. But I mean, that really just depends on the type of transaction activity that we're seeing. Like if we're seeing parallelizable workloads, I do think that the end outcome of having one global VM that supports atomic transactions is the ideal outcome, rather than having like separate shards or separate rollups. So to that end, I think that the approach that we would like to see would be one global VM supporting atomic transactions that is horizontally scalable. So one approach that we've been considering is an intra-validator sharding approach, where each validator is composed of multiple machines. And assuming it's a somewhat parallelizable workload, then you can have different states and different compute happening on different machines. So yeah, I think overall the rollup ecosystem is very interesting right now, and we're going to be following that very closely as well.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Jay, for your opinion. I will have to dig into some like the inter-validator, something that you mentioned, but that will be other time that I have to do my own research. But it's actually interesting, in my opinion, also that Ethereum is finally adopting the app chain thesis instead of like the fat application. But so because Sei mission is going to focus on scaling, as of you mentioned from the start, and the user experience. For the chains being built on rollups, they may have to encounter the scaling problem. For Sei, I don't think we are going to experience any of those. What are you guys sacrificing, or are you guys sacrificing anything for in exchange to maintain those scalability?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, there's always trade-offs with whatever kind of approach that you take. The biggest trade-off that we made from our side is getting started with Tendermint for the core consensus algorithm. Tendermint allows for instant finality, which is really, really positive for market makers, because you have single slot finality, which means that there's no reorgs, no forks that can happen, which makes it for a much simpler market making experience. Because otherwise, if you can have like reorgs and forks, it's possible for you to like try to hedge a position off something that hasn't been finalized yet. So you have like an ether that is that you buy in block A, and then you hedge that position off chain immediately, and then block A gets reorged away, and then that block is no longer there. So then you're just left holding this hedged position. That's a really bad outcome for market makers. So single slot finality is great. The thing that is not as great about Tendermint is it requires n-squared connections between the different validators. So in order for a new block to be added, all the validators need to reach consensus between each other. So it essentially ends up needing n-squared communication overhead, which doesn't scale very well. And that's why most Cosmos chains, I think Cosmos Hub is the Cosmos chain that has the most number of validators, and that's currently at 175 validators. So that's the biggest trade-off that we're making, which is the size of the validator set ends up being smaller, and that allows us to lean in more to having the scalability improvements that we've been able to make. Because if the size of the validator set is capped anyway, then we're able to make certain assumptions about the way that things perform that really only work with like the single spot finality approach that would not be as easy to do with like an ecosystem like Ethereum or Solana, for example. With that being said, like the really good thing about Cosmos and Tendermint is that they're very modular. All the changes that I described before around like twin turbo consensus, around parallelization, that was us just taking Cosmos and then we're improving and tweaking the parts of it that needed to be improved. So we have ideas for how we can tweak Tendermint as well to make it support a more distributed or like a larger validator set. But I think the biggest trade-off right now is just a smaller validator set that is being used.
I see. So it's the good old problems for the Cosmos SDK that you guys are also experiencing. But I think it may get better over time, right? With those stuff.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, the Comet BFT team, like Comet BFT is now taking over Tendermint. Comet BFT, they're just thinking a lot about these problems from their side as well. Decentralization is on the top of everyone's mind. So they are definitely considering avenues that you can take to have greater decentralization in like the number of validators. I mean, there's some pretty low-hanging ideas for like things that we could very easily do as well. Like Ethereum Beacon Chain has this concept of like these validator committees where you might have 100 separate committees. Each committee is composed of 100 separate validators. This does increase the time to finality, but that becomes a very straightforward way where you can have consensus amongst these committees. And then afterwards you have consensus amongst the 100 separate committees. So there are ways to increase the validator set size. It's just someone needs to do the work for it. Someone needs to actually like just benchmark what the results end up being, but it's not theoretically an impossible problem to solve at all.
I see. Thank you for your thoughts so much, Jay. Okay, let's get back to Sei question. So from the current development of Sei Network, so what's the current status of your chain? When can we or other users expect the mainnet launch?
Yeah, so I would say that things have been going very strong, very well overall. We launched our second public testnet a couple of days ago, on track to launch mainnet around May, June timeframe of this year. And the biggest thing that we're focusing on from our engineering team side is just doing as much testing as we can possibly do. This public testnet came after around 2 months of very, very rigorous load testing, chaos testing, and a bunch of other normal testing practices like unit testing, integration tests. So engineering side, we're heads down, just making sure that everything is well tested before we launch. From more of a growth standpoint, the biggest thing that matters for Sei's success is getting strong applications to build on Sei. At this point, there's over 120 applications that are committed to building on Sei. Some of the ones that I'm really excited about are, first of all, SushiSwap. So Sushi, a couple of months ago, they announced that they're going to be launching a perpetuals exchange on Sei. So I'm extremely bullish on that. The Sushi team has proven that they're extremely capable of executing. So we're going to be the first ecosystem that they launched on outside of the Ethereum ecosystem. So I think that's going to be very, very positive. The second project that I'm very excited about is Cargo. So Cargo is building a prediction markets framework, essentially, prediction markets middleware. So most prediction markets, they end up being pretty different. Like trying to build a prediction markets from the US for someone that is in India, like the cricket matches around that and they're building up a community around that is difficult. But having a middleware where different teams can come and build their own prediction markets based off which geographic zone they're in, that ends up being a lot simpler of a thing to do. So that's why I'm excited about that, because they're not just building the exchange, they're just building the middleware that allows other people to build more geographically focused prediction markets, which is, I think, a very interesting design space to explore. Besides that, there's a lot of other projects like there's an esports league, which is taking a more social spin on things, which no one has really done before. So I'm extremely excited about that. There's like Senate tokens that people are launching as well. So similar to Chile's, except with like the US senators. So I think there's a lot of pretty different types of projects that people are building on Sei, in addition to the normal things that you would expect to see, like spot markets using an order book, spot markets using an AMM, and a lot of the other more vanilla DeFi types of applications. So the ecosystem is getting ready for the mainnet launch, which will be happening in a couple of months.
All right. Thank you for the insight, Jay. I believe that some of those are the alphas, and it's actually great that there are more and more the application being built on Sei, which they have their own diversification inside of themselves, not just like their own like spot or AMM, but of course they are some like maybe some betting protocols or other protocol that will have to utilize the exchange function. Oh, that's great. So of course, because testnet's launch, mainnet is going to launch in the near futures, I am certain that a lot of community members wondering about the airdrops. Can you give us any information about?
Oh man, classic questions. When mainnet, when
Yep.
airdrop.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there will be an airdrop. So there's currently incentivized testnet rewards as well. So anyone that participates in the incentivized testnet will be eligible to get rewards. We just really want the community to get engaged with the testnet, help catch any potential issues. So there will be 1% of the overall token supply being given for the incentivized testnet. In terms of the airdrop as well, we're going to be giving out a pretty meaty airdrop to folks that I guess have done stuff in other ecosystems or potentially in Sei as well. There will be more details to come around that. We haven't announced anything, so no alpha to be giving on the airdrop. But I mean, if you want to engage with Sei, participate in the testnet, you will get incentivized testnet rewards. So that is a very easy way to position yourself well for the mainnet launch.
All right. So guys, there's no alphas here. Just stay, just stay,
Yeah, sorry to let you down, man.
contribute. Yeah, just keep on contributing with the upcoming like events or anything, and you guys will be good. Just just
So
don't do something weird.
Yeah. So for anyone that's interested in learning more about that, you could go to our Twitter. So it's SEI Network. So that's the Sei Network Twitter handle. You could go over there, and then afterwards there's a link tree. You can follow along. There's an entire incentivized testnet missions document that you can find from there as well. So that would be the easiest way to get started and learn more.
All right. So I think that's it for my question and also the community question where everyone always asks when token, when airdrop. I think the question is already they already been answered.
Awesome, sweet. Well, yeah, thank you for having me on Crypto Bubble. This was great. Are we going to be doing an AMA at the end of this as well, like answering community questions, or is this?
Oh, sure. We, of course, I believe there are some question being asked in the chat box, and I'll bring it up here. Okay, we didn't scan the question, but here one is from Acoustic CPK. So can you see the question here?
Yeah, I can see the question. Would it be helpful for me to just summarize the question, or should I just go ahead and answer it?
You can just answer the question.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the Atlantis program, for folks that don't have context, is a fully community-led program that some of the Sei ambassadors are working on. And this is the program that has over 2,300 folks that are participating in it. So extremely decentralized, extremely community-led program. And Thailand is one of the biggest places where folks from this program are participating. So I really wanted to give a huge shout out to anyone that is part of the Atlantis program that is listening in right now. It does seem like just organically Thailand has a massive community for Sei. So super excited about the ways that we can have events over there in the future and the way that the Atlantis program can hold, just have more of a presence over there. And yeah, I mean, in terms of my thoughts about the Atlantis program, yeah, I have very positive thoughts. It's really difficult to get people to actually give a shit about something. And it's honestly, I think that's the part that I've been just most happy about with the growth that Sei has had. Like the technical side of it is great, but just seeing people from like places that I've like never been to myself, like some of our hubs are like Turkey and Thailand and just like Ukraine as well. And these are countries that I've never been to myself. And it's pretty wild that people from these countries are resonating with the same mission. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. We'll be holding more events in Thailand as well. So definitely encourage you to stop by when we're holding those events.
All right, that's great because one of the other question is people the same guy he asked about the DeFi bootcamp by DYDX and say took place in Japan, right? So,
Yeah.
are you going to plan any of those event in Thailand also?
Yes, absolutely. So we did have a DeFi bootcamp event. We co-organized that with DYDX, and that was held a couple of months ago in Japan. We want to be doing that in every major place where there is, say, a strong state presence. So Thailand is definitely one of those places. So we will be having more activity happening over there, most likely within the next 6-month window. But yeah, keep following the SEI Network Twitter, and there'll be more updates around that as well.
All right, great. In 6 month time frame, we will have like a DeFi bootcamp here. Are you going to attend here also, or you have some stuff to do?
I mean, it really just depends on when that will be happening. There's a very good chance that I can come in person as well.
All
So
right.
yeah, I mean,
So
yeah, there will definitely be folks from our team over there. There'll be updates on whether I can attend as well. So happy to meet anyone in person when I come.
okay, so let me check the other question. So this one is a simple question, but I think it will be a good like summary for the end of our AMAs. So Mr. Jack asked like, what is Sei token and how could we use it on Sei Network Chain?
Yeah, so the Sei token is a utility token to secure the Sei layer 1 blockchain. So it's very similar to the Solana token, in which it's used for governance, it's used for transaction fees, and it's used for securing the network. In addition to that, Sei's token is also going to be very exciting because of the MEV redistribution prospects around that. So that'll lead to long-term sustainability and value accrual for the chain through redistributing MEV that is tied to liquidations and ARBs and NFT mints.
All right. Thank you. I think that's actually made a good ending. And unless you want to like answer more, just feel free to let me know.
I mean, I'm happy to make this an hour-long session where we just answer any outstanding questions there are, but I don't know if there's any other questions stand out.
Okay. I'm not sure if you can personally choose. Can you try clicking on the question?
No, I can't click on any of the comments.
Okay, let me try picking. How about this one? About price, of course. I don't think it's good to be talking about price, but in case, just because there are going to be a lot of beginners audience, I think maybe you can give them some
Yeah, of course.
veteran
So
advice.
yeah, so I mean, around this question specifically around security of the blockchain, Sei makes use of proof of stake security. So people need to be delegating tokens, and then if a validator misbehaves, then those tokens will get slashed. So people will lose money if someone misbehaves. So that ends up being the kind of game theory approach that Sei is taking around this, and it's been extremely battle tested at this point. Most major blockchains outside of Bitcoin actually use this. So Ethereum migrated over to using proof of stake as well. With their merge that happened last year now, which is kind of crazy that it's been that long. And then most other major networks like Solana, Aptos, Avalanche, Near, they're all using proof of stake as well. In terms of one thing that Sei is thinking about that is different, we think that the idea of additive security is very interesting to explore. Additive security means that besides just having your own token secure the chain, you can rent security from other networks that have potentially that have a higher market cap than you, that have more economic security that they can offer. So one example of this would be EigenLayer with Ethereum. The way that would work is people on Ethereum would be able to restake their Ether. So they're already staking it to secure the Ethereum blockchain, but they could stake it one more time to secure the Sei blockchain. Then if any of the Sei validators misbehave, then there would be the Ethereum tokens would then get slashed, right? So by doing that, you're able to rent security from other chains. The benefit for Ethereum stakers would be additional yield, because there will be some staking rewards or some MEV redistribution rewards that would then go to whoever is restaking from Ethereum. So what will realistically end up happening if we go down a route like that is, let's say there's 100 token staking reward budget. Currently 100 of those tokens would be given to Sei stakers. In the future, 80 might be going to Sei stakers, and the other 20 would be going to people that are restaking from Ethereum. So it becomes a very easy way to get more people from other ecosystems to put up collateral to get staked and slashed as well. And in exchange, they get somewhat higher yields than they would otherwise be getting.
All right, thank you, Jay. I was about to ask some question about Sei Network going to use like the replicated security from Atom Cosmos, but it seemed like maybe you guys are going to participate in there too, right?
So we're not using replicated security. So for listeners, the Cosmos Hub has this concept of replicated security, which is where you can use the Cosmos Hub validator set as the only validator set for your chain. So then you would not have your own validators and you would basically replicate their security onto your chain. That's not the approach that we wanted to take with Sei, because we wanted to have customizability over the entire validator network and also over the consensus logic and over the time to finality. So if we had made use of replicated security, we would have essentially needed to use the Cosmos Hub validator set, had Cosmos Hub block times, and that would not have been the ideal trading experience that we were looking for. So yeah, in our case, we're not using replicated security, but there is, so replicated security is interchain security V1. There's this concept of layered security, which is interchain security V2. That's something that is much more interesting to me. And layered security is essentially that additive security idea that I described before, where specific validators can choose to put up tokens to get slashed. In exchange, they would be eligible for getting additional staking rewards. So I think that's much more of an interesting avenue to explore.
Okay, I certainly understand that, because the replicated security will only provide benefits onto the Atom chain, right? It's not like a two-way, but it's of course provides the security, but they take our scalability too. Okay, I see the problem now, and I think it's the wise choice that you guys choose not to participate in those. Okay, let's see. Is there any other good question? I mean, everyone being here is good. Sorry for saying something weird. Okay, got it. Hold it. Boop, boop. Is there any benefits for those who have, say, event winner roles? Only 50% got it. Hope it will have a utility since it's fairly limited. Is this like kind of confidential? It's alpha?
Yeah, so I'm not, so I mean, even from the Sei Lab side, there's 19 folks on the team. I'm not super involved with this Sei event winner process. I'm not actually sure what this is referencing. So there's other folks on the team that handle this. So I mean, yeah, if you have a question around this, Ahmad, then I can have someone else from the team follow up with this.
Okay, let's move on to the next question now. This is from the boy Shine. He say, in Atlantic 2, are we gonna use Vortex as a main platform for the network testing, or there will be other apps joining in this round?
Yeah, there will be other apps joining in this round. Even now, there's a lot of other things that have already deployed, like wallets and bridges, and there's going to be other trading platforms that are deploying in the next around 2 to 3 week time window as well.
Okay, so there will be other.
Yeah, there will be other ones as well. And I think there was one question that was pretty interesting that we skipped over, the Ming question.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So
all right. Please continue.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I think this would be a great question to kind of end things on. So yeah, from our standpoint, this kind of ties into what I was saying before. I think that the entire, like, there's just going to be much more of a focus on doing things in a decentralized fashion. All decentralized entities having issues that we've seen in the past year, that's just very unacceptable. And the really nice thing about decentralization is that everything is trustless. So the first thing that I believe will happen in terms of evolution is that more on-chain activity will start happening. I think this is going to start off from developing nations much more strongly than developed nations. Like people that are like Silicon Valley engineers, they don't really have too many, I would say, existential issues around like the financial infrastructure that they're using, compared to maybe someone that's in a developing country where their financial infrastructure isn't as good. In many countries already, they're starting to use crypto for payments just because of the lack of strong financial infrastructure. So I think a combination of different things will lead to greater crypto adoption in the next like 10-year window. I also think that Sei is going to be the place where, if we're successful, then it'll become the primary place where trading ends up happening. So a majority of on-chain trading activity would end up happening on Sei. So I think that it would be quite possibly one of the most important parts of the crypto landscape in the future if we end up succeeding in actually building the infrastructure that leads to better experiences for exchanges.
All right. Thank you so much, Jay. That actually make a lot of sense by you mentioning the developing countries adopting the blockchain financial system faster than the already developed one, because of course developed one also have some problem like what we are seeing right, but there are problem with regulations and other stuff which it will take a lot of time until those time arrive, but eventually I think we both agree that it will come.
Yeah, I definitely agree over there. So yeah, Crypto Bobo, this was a lot of fun. I really loved all the questions the community was asking as well. I think this is one of the most engaging AMAs I've had. Like most of them do not have a community that is asking so many good questions. So appreciated from everyone listening in as well. If there's anything that I can help with for you personally, feel free to just DM me on Twitter. I'll be responsive. Besides that, we have an entire Discord channel where folks from our team can get involved as well. So really thank you for taking the time right now, Crypto Bobo. This was a lot of fun.
Yes. Thank you so much from my side to Jay. It's my pleasure to be hosting an AMA for you, because a lot of Thais are being like they are really participating in Sei Network, like every test net, and the activities you guys gain from Thai community is extraordinary. It's like it's a lot. Even like then like people who doesn't really like good with DeFi, they already know DeFi for trying to participating onto your testnet. So great job to you guys with the testnet announcement and every those stuff. Yes, yeah, you got it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And yeah, thank you everyone for
Alright.
joining in. This was great.
Okay, then let's catch up later then.
Of
All right.
course.
See you guys. Thank you for joining our AMAs.